Billionaire CEO invited his childless ex-wife to his baby shower to shame her. She came with twins. The silence spread like a wave across the grand conservatory as Nora Matthews pushed the double stroller through the open doors. Crystal glasses froze mid-toast. Conversations died mid-sentence. All eyes turned to watch the elegant woman who had once been the mistress of this estate. At the center of the gathering, Dominic Reed stood frozen. Champagne flute suspended halfway to his lips. His face draining of color as his gaze dropped from his ex-wife's face to the two identical pairs of amber eyes peering curiously from the stroller. Eyes that mirrored his own. "Nora," he managed, his voice strained. "What is the meaning of this?" She smiled with the quiet confidence of a woman who had nothing left to fear. "You invited me to see what a real family looks like, Dominic. I thought I'd return the favor." His pregnant wife placed a protective hand over her swollen belly. "Dominic, who is this?" she asked, though the tension in her voice suggested she already knew. "My ex-wife," he replied tightly, thrusting his glass at a nearby server. "We need to talk. Privately." "Actually," Nora countered, her voice carrying clearly through the hushed room. "I think we've had enough privacy. You've spent 3 years telling everyone I was childless by choice. I thought it was time for the truth to come out. Have you ever witnessed someone's carefully constructed lie collapse in an instant? That moment when power shifts and the truth finally emerges? If you've ever been underestimated or dismissed by someone who thought they held all the cards, this story will resonate deep in your soul. Give this video a like if you believe in the power of truth to overcome even the most carefully crafted deception. Hi, my beautiful sisters. This story is for every woman who's been told she wasn't enough, who's had her worth measured by someone else's yardstick. It's for those who've been shamed, blamed, or made to feel broken when things beyond their control didn't go as planned. Remember this: your value isn't determined by anyone else's narrative about you. Your strength lies in knowing your truth and standing firmly in it, even when the whole world believes otherwise. As you listen to Nora's journey, I hope you find the courage to reclaim your own story, whatever it may be. I'm Mr. Harrison, and today I'm sharing the remarkable story of how a woman's quiet dignity transformed a moment meant for her humiliation into a powerful reclamation of her truth. The invitation had arrived on a Tuesday, its cream envelope embossed with the familiar logo of Dominic Reed's company. A sleek, minimalist R that had become synonymous with innovation and wealth. Nora Matthews stared at it for several long moments before finding the courage to slide her finger beneath the seal. Inside, elegant calligraphy announced, "Dominic and Isabel Reed cordially invite you to celebrate the impending arrival of their first child." The baby shower was scheduled for the following Saturday at the Reed estate, the sprawling mansion that had once been Nora's home too, before everything fell apart. A handwritten note in Dominic's distinctive sharp script was paperclipped to the invitation. "Thought you might want to see what a real family looks like. D." Nora's hands trembled slightly as she set the invitation on her kitchen counter. 3 years had passed since their divorce. 3 years of rebuilding her life, of finding her footing after being cast aside by one of the most powerful men in the tech industry. 3 years of whispered rumors about her failure as a wife, her inability to give Dominic the heir he so desperately wanted for his empire. What the gossip columns and industry insiders didn't know, what Dominic himself didn't know, was that Nora had given birth to twins just 6 months ago. Beautiful, perfect twins who slept peacefully in the nursery of her modest but comfortable home on the other side of the city. Ms. Matthews, Elena, the nanny Nora had hired to help with the babies while she worked, appeared in the doorway. "Mia just woke up, but Lucas is still sleeping." "Thank you, Elena. I'll go to her." Nora tucked the invitation into a drawer, but not before taking one last look at Dominic's cruel note. A plan was already forming in her mind, one that made her heart race with both anxiety and a strange sense of anticipation. As she lifted her daughter from the crib, Nora studied the perfect little face that held so much of Dominic in its features. Those distinctive amber eyes that had once made her heart skip a beat when he looked at her with love. But Mia also had Nora's smile, her dimples, her quiet determination already evident even at 6 months old. "What do you think, little one?" she whispered, gently rocking the baby. Should we show your father exactly what he threw away? Mia gurgled happily in response, tiny fingers reaching up to touch her mother's face. The story of Nora Matthews and Dominic Reed had once been the stuff of modern fairy tales. She had been a brilliant software engineer working at his rapidly growing tech company, catching his eye during a product development meeting when she'd fearlessly pointed out a critical flaw in his flagship design. "Mr. Reed, there's a vulnerability in the encryption protocol that could compromise user data," she had stated calmly. Despite the tension that fell over the conference room, no one challenged Dominic Reed directly, especially not a relatively new hire. Instead of the anger everyone expected, Dominic had leaned forward, those intense amber eyes fixed on her. "Show me." Nora had walked to the whiteboard without hesitation, mapping out the vulnerability with precise, economical strokes. When she finished her explanation, Dominic had smiled, a genuine expression rarely seen in the office. "You just saved us from a potential disaster," he had acknowledged, "and created 3 weeks of additional work for the team. Better than creating years of security breaches for our users," Nora had replied, returning to her seat without fanfare. That evening, Dominic had appeared at her workstation as she was preparing to leave. "Have dinner with me," he'd said, the word somewhere between a question and a command. Their whirlwind romance had captivated the business world. The genius billionaire CEO and the quietly confident woman who challenged him intellectually. Within 8 months, they were married in a ceremony featured in every major business and society publication. For 3 years, their marriage had seemed perfect from the outside. But behind closed doors, the pressure to produce an heir had gradually poisoned everything between them. Month after month of negative pregnancy tests had transformed Dominic from an adoring husband into a cold, distant stranger. "Perhaps if you reduced your work hours," he had suggested after the first year of trying. "The stress might be affecting your fertility." "The doctors have found nothing wrong with either of us," Nora had reminded him. "Sometimes these things just take time." But time was something Dominic Reed had never learned to respect. A man who had built a tech empire before the age of 35, he was accustomed to immediate results, to bending reality to his will through sheer force of determination and resources. As the second year of their marriage passed without a pregnancy, his suggestions became demands, then accusations. "You're not really trying," he'd said one night after coming home to find Nora working late on a project. "Your career has always been your priority." The irony was bitter. Nora had already scaled back her role at Reed Technologies, stepping away from the cutting-edge projects that had once brought them together, all to focus on their attempts to conceive. But Dominic only saw what confirmed his narrative. Medical tests had revealed nothing wrong with either of them, just the cruel randomness of fertility that couldn't be solved with money or power. They had begun IVF treatments, a process that left Nora physically and emotionally drained, while Dominic grew increasingly impatient with each failed attempt. "It's simple biology, Nora," Dominic had said during their final argument, his voice clinically detached. "We're incompatible. I need someone who can give me children." The divorce had been swift and brutal. Dominic's PR team had carefully crafted a narrative that painted Nora as career-obsessed and uninterested in motherhood, while portraying him as a man who simply wanted a traditional family. The substantial settlement she received came with an ironclad NDA that prevented her from publicly contradicting his version of events. What Dominic never knew was that their last attempt at IVF had actually succeeded. Nora discovered her pregnancy 3 weeks after signing the divorce papers, when she was already establishing her new life and independent consulting business. After years of heartbreak and Dominic's increasingly cruel comments about her barren state, she had made the difficult decision to keep the pregnancy to herself. The discovery that she was carrying twins had been both terrifying and exhilarating. Alone in the doctor's office, Nora had stared at the ultrasound screen showing 2 distinct heartbeats, tears streaming down her face. "Would you like to know the genders?" the doctor had asked gently. "Yes," Nora had whispered. "Yes, I would. A boy and a girl. Perfect symmetry. A complete family with or without their father. If you've ever had to rebuild your life after someone tried to break your spirit, hit that like button." And if you believe that sometimes the universe has a way of delivering perfect justice, subscribe to Timeless Love Tales with Mr. Harrison for more stories of triumph over adversity. The most incredible part of Nora's journey is still to come. The pregnancy had been challenging, more so with twins, but Nora had faced it with the same quiet determination that had defined her professional life. She had built a support network of friends and hired help, prepared a nursery in her new home, and continued building her consulting business from home until the final weeks before delivery. When Lucas and Mia were born on a snowy December morning, Nora had experienced a love so overwhelming it made her previous heartbreak seem distant and small. Looking into their tiny faces, she saw glimpses of Dominic but also parts of herself, a perfect blending that created something entirely new and precious. "They're beautiful," the nurse had said as she placed the swaddled twins in Nora's arms. "You're going to be an amazing mother." Those simple words had healed something deep inside Nora, a wound inflicted by Dominic's cruel dismissal of her maternal potential. In that moment, she had known with absolute certainty that she had made the right decision in keeping her pregnancy private. For 6 months, she had navigated the exhausting, exhilarating journey of new motherhood. She had learned to function on minimal sleep, to interpret different cries, to find joy in the smallest developments. Mia's first smile, Lucas's fascination with his own hands. Through it all, the question of whether to tell Dominic had lingered in the back of her mind, never quite resolved, until the invitation arrived. The decision crystallized over the next few days as Nora consulted with her attorney about the legal implications. The NDA prevented her from publicly discussing the divorce, but it said nothing about the children born after the marriage ended. Legally, Dominic had rights as their father, but he had also made it abundantly clear that he believed they couldn't have children together. "He'll be furious," her attorney, Rachel Goldman, had warned during their meeting. "He might try to claim you deceived him, that you denied him his children." "Let him," Nora replied, a new steel in her voice that had developed since becoming a mother. "I have the medical records showing I discovered the pregnancy after the divorce was finalized. And I have 3 years of him publicly claiming I never wanted children." Rachel had studied her client carefully. "This isn't just about legal rights, Nora. Are you prepared for what this will do? The media attention? The inevitable custody battle? Dominic Reed isn't a man who loses gracefully." "I'm not doing this to win or lose," Nora had explained, her resolve strengthening with each word. "I'm doing this because he invited me to his baby shower to humiliate me. Because he spent 3 years painting me as defective and unmaternal. Because my children deserve to know their father, even if he's a man who discarded their mother when she didn't serve his purpose. And if he tries to take them from you, then I'll fight with everything I have," Nora had said simply. "But first, he needs to know they exist." By Saturday morning, her resolve was unshakable. Elena helped her dress the twins in matching outfits, soft blue for Lucas and lavender for Mia, that highlighted their Reed features while showcasing their Matthews dimples. Nora herself chose a simple but elegant dress that skimmed her post-pregnancy figure, her once-long hair now cut into a confident bob that framed her face. "You look beautiful, Ms. Matthews," Elena said as she helped secure Mia in her car seat. "And very brave." "Not brave," Nora corrected gently. "Just done hiding." The drive to the Reed estate brought back a flood of memories, both beautiful and painful. Nora had once loved the sprawling property with its manicured gardens and breathtaking views of the coastline. She had helped design the landscaping, selecting each tree and shrub with care, imagining future children playing beneath their shade. Now, as she pulled through the imposing gates, those memories felt like scenes from someone else's life. The security guard did a double-take when he recognized her but waved her through without question. Her name must still be on some approved list, an oversight Dominic would surely correct after today. Valets were directing guests' vehicles, but Nora bypassed them, parking in the spot that had once been designated as hers when she lived here. A small act of defiance, but one that steadied her nerves as she carefully removed the twins from their car seats and positioned them in the double stroller she had brought. "This is your father's home," she told them softly as they gazed around with wide, curious eyes. A part of your history, whether he wants to acknowledge it or not. The baby shower was being held in the estate's grand conservatory, a soaring glass structure filled with exotic plants and bathed in natural light. Nora could hear the murmur of conversation and occasional laughter as she approached. Taking a deep breath, she pushed the stroller through the open doors. The confrontation that followed, Dominic's shock, his accusations, Isabel's confusion, unfolded exactly as Nora had anticipated. What she hadn't expected was the strange calm that settled over her as she stood her ground, the twins' presence giving her a strength she had never known during her marriage. They can't be. Dominic's voice faltered as he stared at the infants. Your children? They absolutely are. Nora knelt to soothe Lucas, who had started to whimper. Meet Lucas and Mia, 6 months old and thriving, despite your certainty that we were biologically incompatible. The gathered guests, mostly business associates and their spouses, were watching the scene unfold with undisguised fascination. Nora recognized several board members among them, men and women who had once respected her as Dominic's wife and partner. This is inappropriate, Dominic hissed, stepping closer. You're ruining Isabel's shower. You ruined our marriage by deciding I was defective, Nora replied evenly. You invited me here to humiliate me, to showcase your new wife's fertility as proof of my failure. Did you really think I would just accept that? Isabel had approached now, her expression a complex mixture of shock, anger, and something that might have been understanding. Dominic, you told me she didn't want children, she said quietly. She didn't, he insisted, but the uncertainty in his voice betrayed him. This must be some kind of trick. Nora laughed, the sound genuine despite the circumstances. Always the businessman looking for the angle. There's no trick, Dominic. Just the IVF treatment we started before you decided I wasn't worth the wait. I found out I was pregnant 3 weeks after you had me served with divorce papers. And you didn't tell me? His voice rose with indignation. You kept my children from me? You made it very clear what you thought of my ability to be a mother, Nora replied, rising to her full height. You spent millions on a PR campaign painting me as career-obsessed and unmaternal. Why would I subject my children to a father who had already rejected the possibility of their existence? The silence that followed was deafening. Around them, guests were discreetly beginning to leave, sensing that the celebration had transformed into something far more personal and painful. Isabel was the first to break the impasse, her hand still protectively cradling her belly. They have your eyes, she said to Dominic, her voice tight with emotion. Exactly your eyes. Dominic seemed unable to respond, his gaze moving between the twins, who had settled again and were looking around with the innocent curiosity of infants unaware of the drama surrounding them. I didn't come here to disrupt your lives, Nora said finally, her voice gentler. I came because you invited me, Dominic, because you wanted to show me what I was missing. But I'm not missing anything. I have everything I need. She turned the stroller, preparing to leave, when Dominic's hand shot out to stop her. Wait, he said, something broken in his voice. Please, they're my children too. If you've ever had to stand up to someone who tried to diminish you, hit that like button right now. And if you believe that every woman deserves to write her own story, not have it written for her by someone else, subscribe to Timeless Love Tales with Mr. Harrison. The most unexpected twist in this confrontation is about to unfold, and you won't want to miss what happens when Nora finally speaks her full truth to the man who tried to erase her. Nora looked at him, really looked at the man she had once loved enough to marry, to dream of building a family with. She saw the shock in his eyes, but also the hunger, the instant connection he felt to the twins that mirrored what she had experienced from the moment she knew of their existence. Yes, they are, she acknowledged. And that's a conversation we can have, but not here, not now. This is your wife's baby shower. She deserves better than this scene we've created. Isabel surprised them both by touching Nora's arm lightly. He told me you couldn't have children together, she said, her voice low enough that only Nora and Dominic could hear. That's why he left. The simple statement contained volumes, Isabel's own realization that the man she had married had built their relationship on a fundamental lie, that the narrative she had accepted about his first wife was false. Biology is full of surprises, Nora replied, offering the other woman a small, genuine smile. Congratulations on your baby. I mean that sincerely. As Nora wheeled the stroller toward the exit, she felt lighter than she had in years. The truth, her truth, was finally out in the open. Whatever came next would be complicated, messy, and undoubtedly difficult as they navigated co-parenting and legal arrangements. But she had faced her past and reclaimed her narrative. Behind her, she could hear Dominic making hurried excuses to the remaining guests. She knew he would follow her, that this confrontation was just the beginning of a new chapter none of them had anticipated. But for the first time since seeing that invitation, Nora felt completely certain of her decision. Her children deserved to know their father, and Dominic deserved to know that his cruel attempt to shame her had instead revealed his own deception. She had almost reached her car when she heard his footsteps on the gravel behind her. Nora, wait! Dominic's voice had lost its public polish, revealing the raw emotion beneath. You can't just leave. We need to talk about this. She turned to face him, keeping one hand on the stroller. We will talk, Dominic. But not here, not today. I'll have my attorney contact yours tomorrow to arrange a proper meeting. Your attorney? His face hardened. Is that how this is going to be? Legal maneuvers and formal negotiations about my own children. What did you expect? Nora asked quietly. That I'd hand them over to you? That we'd instantly become one big happy family? You discarded me, Dominic. You told the world I was inadequate as a woman and a potential mother. Actions have consequences. He ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair, a gesture of frustration she remembered from their marriage. I didn't know you were pregnant. No, you didn't, because you were too busy crafting a narrative that served your ego to consider any other possibility. I had a right to know, he insisted, his voice rising slightly. Perhaps, Nora conceded. But rights come with responsibilities. You abandoned your responsibility to our marriage, to our shared dream of a family, the moment it became inconvenient for you. Dominic fell silent, his gaze dropping to the twins, who were beginning to fuss in the stroller. Lucas let out a small cry, his tiny face scrunching in discomfort. He's hungry, Nora explained, checking her watch. It's past their feeding time. I need to get them home. Something shifted in Dominic's expression, a flicker of reality breaking through his anger. These weren't just symbolic children, extensions of his ego or proof of his virility. They were real, tiny humans with needs that couldn't wait for adult conflicts to resolve. Let me help you get them to the car, he said, his tone softer. Nora nodded, allowing him to assist as she transferred the twins to their car seats. His hands were awkward but gentle as he tried to help, clearly unfamiliar with the mechanics of buckling an infant safely. They're beautiful, he said quietly as Mia grabbed his finger with surprising strength. They look like you around the mouth and chin. But they have your eyes, Nora replied. And Lucas has your temperament. Impatient, determined. A ghost of a smile touched Dominic's lips. And Mia, observant, thoughtful. She watches everything before she reacts. They stood there for a moment, the estranged parents of two perfect children, the air between them heavy with unspoken words and complicated emotions. I want to be part of their lives, Dominic finally said. Whatever it takes. It will take a lot, Nora replied honestly. Trust, respect, acknowledgement of the truth, publicly. His jaw tightened at that last requirement. You want me to damage my reputation. I want you to correct a lie you created, she countered. There's a difference. Before he could respond, Isabel appeared at the edge of the driveway, one hand supporting her pregnant belly as she walked carefully toward them. Dominic tensed, clearly unprepared for this confrontation. Isabel, you should go back inside, he called. The guests are leaving, she finished for him. The party's over, Dominic. She approached until she stood beside him, her gaze moving between her husband and his ex-wife with remarkable composure given the circumstances. Mrs. Reed, Nora acknowledged with a small nod. Ms. Matthews. Isabel's voice was steady. I think we need to have an honest conversation, all three of us. But not today. Today has been overwhelming. I agree, Nora said, surprised by the other woman's dignity. My attorney will be in touch to arrange something. I'd prefer if we could speak directly, Isabel replied. Without attorneys, at least initially. This situation affects all of us, and our children deserve better than a legal battle. Dominic looked at his current wife with undisguised surprise. Isabel, you don't need to involve yourself in this. I'll handle it. Like you handled the truth about your divorce? She asked, a new edge to her voice. No, Dominic. This affects my child too, a half-sibling to these twins. I won't be sidelined. Nora felt a reluctant admiration for the woman. She had expected a pampered trophy wife, not this steel-spined person who was clearly unwilling to accept Dominic's version of events at face value. I'm willing to meet, Nora agreed, but not at the estate. Neutral ground. My family has a property in Montauk, Isabel suggested. Private, comfortable. We could meet there next weekend. Dominic looked between the two women, clearly unsettled by their calm negotiation without his input. I have meetings scheduled. Cancel them, both women said simultaneously, then exchanged a look of startled understanding. Despite everything, Nora felt a small smile tug at her lips. Perhaps there was more common ground here than she had anticipated. Next weekend, she agreed. I'll bring the twins, of course. Of course, Isabel echoed. I'd like to get to know them. Their family, after all. As Nora drove away from the Reed estate, the twins sleeping peacefully in their car seats, she reflected on the unexpected turns the day had taken. She had come seeking justice, perhaps even a measure of revenge for Dominic's cruelty. Instead, she had found something more complex, the beginning of a new reality that none of them had anticipated but all would have to navigate together. The week that followed was a whirlwind of preparations and legal consultations. Rachel Goldman had been predictably concerned about the informal meeting. You should have an attorney present, she insisted during their call. Dominic Reed didn't build a tech empire by playing fair. And his new wife is from the Mercer family. Old money, powerful connections. I'm not going in naively, Nora assured her. But I want to try this approach first. For the twins' sake. At least let me draft a temporary agreement outlining visitation terms and confidentiality requirements. Something to protect you until we can establish a formal custody arrangement. Nora agreed to this compromise, knowing that Rachel's caution was well-founded. Dominic had proven himself capable of ruthless self-interest. She couldn't risk her children's well-being on the hope that fatherhood had instantly transformed him. The night before the Montauk meeting, as Nora packed the twins' necessities for the trip, Elena voiced the concern that had been lingering in the back of Nora's mind. Are you worried he might try to take them from you? The nanny asked gently as she folded tiny outfits into the travel bag. Nora paused, considering the question honestly. Not physically, no. But legally? Possibly. Dominic likes to win, and he has resources I can't match. But you have truth on your side, Elena pointed out. And those babies adore you. Anyone can see that. Truth doesn't always prevail in custody battles, Nora replied, thinking of friends who had lost children to wealthier, more powerful ex-partners despite being loving, capable parents. But I have to believe that exposing his lie was the right thing to do. They deserve to know their father, and he deserves to know them, even if his initial interest comes from pride rather than love. If you've ever had to navigate a complex family situation with grace and dignity, hit that like button. And if you believe that sometimes the most powerful thing a person can do is speak their truth without seeking revenge, subscribe to Timeless Love Tales with Mr. Harrison. In our final segment, we'll see how Nora, Dominic, and Isabel forge an unexpected path forward that puts the children's needs above their complicated adult emotions. The Mercer family property in Montauk was a sprawling beachfront compound, more casual than the Reed estate but no less impressive in its quiet display of generational wealth. As Nora pulled up to the main house, she spotted Dominic pacing on the wide porch, his usual polished appearance slightly rumpled, as if he hadn't slept well. Isabel appeared in the doorway behind him, her pregnant silhouette backlit by the warm interior lights. She raised a hand in greeting as Nora parked, a surprisingly welcoming gesture given the circumstances. "Let me help with the twins," Dominic said, approaching the car before Nora had fully turned off the engine. His eagerness was palpable, a stark contrast to his controlled demeanor at the baby shower. "Thank you," Nora replied, deciding to accept the olive branch. Lucas's carrier is on the passenger side. Together, they unloaded the sleeping twins and their seemingly endless supplies: diaper bag, formula, extra clothes, favorite toys. Dominic insisted on carrying Lucas, studying his son's face with undisguised wonder as they walked toward the house. "He looks so peaceful when he sleeps," he murmured. "Does he always sleep this soundly?" "Only in the car," Nora replied with a small smile. "At home, he fights sleep like it's his sworn enemy. Just like his father," Isabel commented as they reached the porch. "Dominic barely sleeps 4 hours a night, always too busy thinking about the next project." The casual observation created an unexpected moment of normalcy between them. Three adults discussing a child's traits, the kind of conversation that happens in functional extended families every day. Inside, the house was warm and inviting, with large windows overlooking the Atlantic and comfortable furniture that invited relaxation rather than formality. Isabel had prepared a nursery area in one corner of the great room, complete with portable cribs and a changing station. "I hope this is adequate," she said, gesturing to the setup. "I asked my sister what 6-month-olds need. She has 3 children. It's perfect," Nora assured her, genuinely touched by the thoughtfulness. "Thank you." They settled the twins in their carriers while Isabel prepared tea, the domestic routine creating a strange bubble of civility that belied the tension humming beneath the surface. When they finally sat down at the large dining table, legal documents spread before them, the moment of reckoning had arrived. "My attorney drafted this temporary agreement," Nora began, sliding the papers toward Dominic. "It outlines visitation, support, and confidentiality until we can establish a more permanent arrangement." Dominic glanced at the documents but didn't pick them up. "Before we get to legalities, I think we need to address the elephant in the room." He took a deep breath, his gaze steady on Nora. "I owe you an apology." The words hung in the air, unexpected and weighty. Nora had prepared for arguments, negotiations, perhaps even threats, but not contrition. "You were right about what I did," he continued when she remained silent. "I crafted a narrative that served my purposes without regard for the truth or for your dignity. I told myself it was justified because I wanted a family so badly. But the reality is that I was cruel and selfish." "Dominic," Isabel interjected softly, "tell her the whole truth." He glanced at his wife, a flash of vulnerability crossing his features before he nodded. "The whole truth is that I was terrified of failure. My entire identity has been built around success. Building the company, making the right investments, having the perfect life. When we couldn't conceive, it felt like the one failure I couldn't solve with money or influence. So I made it your failure instead of ours." Nora absorbed his words, searching for the calculated manipulation she had expected but finding only raw honesty. "Why now? Because you've seen the twins? Because you want access to them?" "Partly," he admitted. "Seeing them, it changed something in me. But also because Isabel refused to move forward until I acknowledged what I'd done." He glanced at his wife with a mixture of respect and chagrin. "She spent the past week making me understand exactly how unacceptable my behavior was." Isabel placed a protective hand over her belly. "When I realized he had lied about why your marriage ended, it made me question everything. The man I thought I married wouldn't do something so cruel. I needed to understand who he really is before bringing our child into this world." The honesty between them created a new dynamic, one Nora hadn't anticipated. She had expected to face Dominic and Isabel as a united front against her. Instead, she found herself aligned with Isabel in demanding accountability from the man who had hurt them both, albeit in different ways. I appreciate the apology, Nora said carefully. But words are easy, Dominic. You spent 3 years destroying my reputation. What matters now is what you're willing to do to make it right. Anything, he replied immediately. A public statement correcting the record. Financial support for the twins that goes beyond legal requirements. Flexible custody arrangements that prioritize their stability. He leaned forward, his expression earnest. I want to be their father, Nora. A real father, not just a name on a birth certificate or a weekend visitor. And what happens when it gets difficult? She challenged. When it interferes with your work. When it's inconvenient or messy or not the perfect family image you've always wanted. I don't know, he admitted, the honesty surprising her again. I can't promise I'll never fail them or you, but I can promise I'll try to be better than I was. That I'll put them first, even when it's hard. Mia began to stir in her carrier, small sounds of wakefulness that would soon become demands for attention. Nora rose automatically to tend to her daughter, but Dominic stood as well. May I? He asked, a tentative request that acknowledged her primary role in the twins' lives. After a moment's hesitation, Nora nodded. Support her head, she instructed as he carefully lifted the baby. Dominic cradled Mia with unexpected gentleness, his expression transforming as she blinked up at him with eyes that mirrored his own. Hello, little one, he whispered. I'm your father. The simple introduction, spoken with such reverence, cracked something in Nora's carefully maintained composure. This was what she had imagined during her pregnancy. Dominic meeting his children, falling instantly in love with them as she had. The reality was both more complicated and more hopeful than her imagination had allowed. She has your determination, Dominic said, not looking away from his daughter's face. I can see it already. The way she focuses, how she holds herself. Pure Nora Matthews. And Lucas has your impatience, Nora replied, a small smile touching her lips despite herself. He wants everything immediately. The Reed temperament, Isabel commented, watching them with a thoughtful expression. Our little one will probably have it too. She rubbed her belly gently. They'll be siblings. 3 children who share a father. A connection that will last their entire lives. The observation shifted something in the atmosphere, reminding all 3 adults that whatever their personal feelings, they were now bound together by the children they had created. The future would require cooperation, communication, and compromise, qualities that had been sorely lacking in Nora and Dominic's marriage. I think we can make this work, Nora said finally, returning to the legal documents on the table. But I need guarantees, Dominic. Not just promises. Whatever you need, he agreed, still holding Mia, who had settled contentedly against his chest. But I'd like to propose something beyond the legal arrangements. What's that? A fresh start, not just for the children, but for all of us. He glanced at Isabel, who nodded encouragingly. I'm planning to step back from day-to-day operations at Reed Technologies, to focus on family for a while. Nora couldn't hide her surprise. Dominic's identity had always been inextricably linked to his company. You're retiring? Scaling back, he clarified. Isabel's pregnancy has made me reevaluate my priorities. Finding out about the twins only reinforced that decision. I've missed too much already, their birth, their first smiles. I don't want to miss any more milestones. And I've suggested we move away from the estate, Isabel added. Somewhere more private, less ostentatious. A real home rather than a showcase. The changes they described were so fundamental, so contrary to the Dominic Reed that Nora had known, that she found herself momentarily speechless. Could people really change so dramatically? Or was this another calculated performance? As if reading her thoughts, Dominic spoke again. I know you have no reason to trust me, Nora. I've given you every reason not to. But becoming a father, even belatedly, has shown me how empty my so-called perfect life has been. I want to do better. For Lucas and Mia. For this new baby. Even for you if you'll let me try to make amends. Lucas chose that moment to wake, his cries demanding immediate attention. Nora lifted him from his carrier, soothing him with practiced ease. "He's hungry," she explained, reaching for the diaper bag. "They both are, probably." "I can prepare the bottles," Isabel offered, rising with surprising agility despite her advanced pregnancy. "If you'll show me how they like them." The three adults moved into a tentative cooperation, preparing formula, changing diapers, settling into the rhythms of childcare that transcended their complicated history. As they worked, Nora observed Dominic's earnest efforts, his willingness to learn, his genuine delight in each small interaction with his children. Perhaps people could change, she reflected. Not overnight, and not without effort, but when given sufficient motivation. The twins were certainly that, a powerful reason to become better versions of themselves. "I think we can make this work," she said again, this time with more conviction. "Not as enemies, not even just as co-parents, but as family. An unconventional one, but family nonetheless." Dominic's expression softened with relief and something that might have been gratitude. "That's more than I deserve, but exactly what I want." "It's what the children deserve," Isabel corrected gently. "All three of them." As the afternoon stretched into evening, they continued their negotiations. Not just about legal arrangements, but about values, expectations, and hopes for their shared future. They agreed on a public statement correcting the narrative about Nora, on generous financial support that would ensure the twins' security without undermining Nora's authority as their primary caregiver, on a gradual introduction of Dominic into their daily lives. When it was time for Nora to leave, Dominic walked her to her car, helping to secure the sleeping twins in their car seats with a tenderness that still surprised her. "Thank you," he said quietly as she prepared to drive away, "for bringing them to the shower, for forcing me to face the truth, for giving me a chance to know them." "I didn't do it for you," Nora replied honestly. "I did it because they deserve to know their father, and because I was tired of living with the lie you created." "I know. That makes it even more meaningful." He hesitated, then added, "The invitation was cruel. I wanted to hurt you because I was hurting. I never imagined it would lead to this gift." Nora studied him in the fading light, this man who had once been the center of her world, who had broken her heart and shattered her trust, who was now the father of her children and a permanent part of her life. "Sometimes the cruelest intentions lead to the most unexpected blessings," she said finally. "Good night, Dominic." As she drove away from the Montauk property, the twins sleeping peacefully behind her, Nora felt a sense of closure that had eluded her for 3 years. Not because she had forgiven Dominic, that would take time and consistent proof of his changed heart, but because she had reclaimed her own narrative. She was no longer the discarded wife, the woman deemed inadequate by a powerful man. She was Nora Matthews, mother, professional, and a woman strong enough to face her past without being defined by it. The invitation meant to shame her had instead become the catalyst for healing, not just for herself but potentially for Dominic as well. And in that unexpected outcome lay the most powerful lesson of all, that sometimes the most effective response to cruelty isn't revenge or bitterness, but the simple, transformative power of truth. 6 months later, as Nora watched Dominic gently bouncing his newborn son, while Lucas and Mia played nearby under Isabel's watchful eye, she marveled at how dramatically their lives had changed. The public statement Dominic had issued correcting the narrative about their divorce had caused a brief media sensation but had ultimately given all of them the freedom to move forward honestly. The Reed Matthews-Mercer family was unconventional by any standard: 2 mothers, 1 father, 3 children connected by blood and growing bonds of genuine affection. They had their challenges, their moments of tension and disagreement, but they were united in their commitment to putting the children first. "Penny for your thoughts," Isabel said, joining Nora on the porch of the beach house they now shared during family weekends. "Just reflecting on how differently things turned out than I expected," Nora replied with a small smile. "When I received that invitation, I thought I was going to a battle. I never imagined we'd end up here." Isabel nodded, her gaze moving to where Dominic sat with the children. "He's changed, really changed. He told me recently that losing you was the best thing that ever happened to him. Not because he didn't love you, but because it forced him to confront who he really was and who he wanted to be. And who is that? Nora asked, genuinely curious. A father first. A better man. Someone worthy of the family he's been given. Isabel smiled. It's a work in progress, but aren't we all? Nora felt her phone vibrate with a message. Glancing down, she saw a text from Michael, her fiancé of 3 months. A successful architect with a gentle demeanor and unwavering support for her unconventional family situation. He had brought a new kind of love into her life, one built on mutual respect and genuine partnership. Michael will be here in about an hour, she told Isabel. He's bringing dinner for everyone. I'm so glad you found him, Isabel said sincerely. The twins adore him, and honestly, so do I. He fits perfectly into the strange family we've created. Nora smiled, touching the simple but elegant engagement ring on her finger. After the pain of her marriage to Dominic, she had never expected to find love again, let alone with someone who embraced not just her and the twins, but the complex co-parenting relationship she maintained with her ex-husband and his wife. As the sun began to set over the Atlantic, casting golden light across their unconventional family gathering, Nora felt a deep sense of peace. The journey from that cruel invitation to this moment had been unpredictable and often difficult, but it had led to something beautiful. A family built not on perfect appearances or societal expectations, but on truth, forgiveness, and the unwavering love of parents for their children. Sometimes, she reflected, the most powerful response to someone who tries to shame you isn't to hide or to strike back, but to stand firmly in your truth and let it illuminate the path forward, not just for yourself, but for everyone involved. If the story touched your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe to Timeless Love Tales with Mr. Harrison. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever had a moment when standing in your truth changed everything? Remember that sometimes the greatest victories don't come from defeating others, but from finding the courage to be authentically yourself, even when facing those who once hurt you deeply.